We begin in Ottawa on the eve of a national summit to combat auto theft. Just last hour, Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc made this announcement, calling it a first step to address the problem.
Today, I'm pleased to announce an additional investment of $28 million to bolster the Canada Border Services Agency's ability to detect and search containers with stolen vehicles. The agency will explore new detection technology solutions and the use of advanced analytical tools such as artificial intelligence.
Currently in Canada, a vehicle is stolen every 5 minutes. There has been a particularly sharp increase in the country's two biggest provinces in the last few years, with auto thefts up 48% in Ontario and by almost 58% in Quebec. Michael Kerzner is the Ontario Solicitor General, and he's set to participate in this summit, and he joins me now. Minister, thanks for joining us. Good to have you here.
Nice to be here with you, David.
You sent a letter to Dominic LeBlanc. I don't know if that's what shook the $28 million from the federal government, but you're urging them to review the criminal code and do more at the ports where a lot of these cars are exported overseas. What specifically do you want to see the government do on those points?
Well, David, we have a crisis. We have a crisis that somewhere in Ontario, as you just showed on your data, a car is stolen. It's completely unacceptable. And what we've been saying for a while is the federal government knows where the cars are going. It's not a great surprise. A lot of them are going through the Port of Montreal. And what we've said to Monsieur LeBlanc is step it up at the port, provide the resources that are required, provide the inspections that are required, and treat the outgoing inspection of cargo the same as you're treating the incoming inspection of cargo.
So what sort of scale is required there? I know $28 million is a lot of money for normal people, and it's going to help with this, but it's not going to solve this. What sort of scale of effort do you want to see from Ottawa here?
Well, David, I just want to say that our government led by Premier Ford, has stepped up. We've invested over $160 million by providing auto theft grants, by providing bail compliance and warrant apprehension grants that will be available to the OPP, municipal and First Nations police services throughout Ontario. And what we're saying is the federal government has to do their part. I don't know if the magic number, David, is $28 million or whatever, but the federal government knows exactly where the cars are going. I just came back. I'm in Ottawa now, David, and I had a day of meetings yesterday with my provincial counterparts from Quebec, and we had a detailed discussion. Everybody across Canada in the different levels of government with the provinces and territories knows the problem is at the port, and the government of Canada has to step it up.
The problem is at the port, but the problem is also how they're finding ways to get into the vehicles, right? The intercepting of the radio signals off of keys, the manipulation of push-button starters. What do you want to see from manufacturers on that front? Because making cars harder to get into and get going in the first place seems like it would help.
Well, David, our government is working collaboratively with these stakeholders, with the automakers, with the insurance companies. But we have a problem when somebody's home is broken into, and we have it as an example in my own constituency, where homes are broken into violently and cars are being stolen. People feel scared. And the worst part is that we know the cars are going, in many cases, to the Port of Montreal. And it's completely unacceptable. We have a crisis. Our government has stepped up. Our government is doing not only the investments through the grants that I've mentioned, but also through the Ontario Police College, where we've expanded the number of people graduating from 1,400 to over 2,200. That's more boots on the ground. And our government takes public safety very seriously.
But Minister, and I'm not in any way minimizing any of those incidents you've talked about there, but the analysis I've seen is that this is not sort of your standard street level crime where someone just smashes the window and grabs a car. This is organized crime, taking advantage of a surge in demand for vehicles because scarcity came out as a result of supply chain challenges from the pandemic, shipping it overseas to get cash to finance other operations. So it's sophisticated, right? And it's global in its scope. So what do you need to see come out of this summit beyond just dealing with the Port of Montreal to get a handle on this?
Well, I think it goes to an expectation and a tone that I know we in Ontario and our government led by Premier Ford takes public safety very seriously. What we need to send a message all across Canada is that public safety matters. Public safety matters a lot. And wherever you are in Canada, you all have, just as we say in Ontario, this inherent right to live safely, to wake up your kids in the morning and to go to work and to come home at the end of the day and be able to be together safely. This is inherently ours. To have these acts of criminality led by people that wish us ill, it's something we're not going to tolerate. And I want to send another message out to people who feel it's okay to steal a car. We're going to find you and we're going to lock you up. And the message is that Ontario and the other provinces, because I've had a great opportunity, David, to speak with my other provincial and territorial counterparts, is that public safety matters, and we're calling on the federal government, step it up.
Okay, I get all of that, but finding the people who stole the car, I mean, there's been a really low recovery rate of stolen vehicles in Ontario and in Quebec, precisely because they're going overseas, right? So it goes back to that challenge of that this is organized crime operating with a level of sophistication that has gotten ahead of law enforcement to this point. So what do you need to do at the municipal and provincial sort of policing level to get a handle on these organized crime gangs that are behind this?
Well, this goes to the $160 million investment that our government has made. Again, it goes to the bail compliance and apprehension grant. And this money flows to the police services together with the auto theft grant so that they have additional personnel, they have additional resources to acquire the technology. And I have to say, David, that our police services across the board in Ontario work very collaboratively together. There's a number of joint force operations that work together. There's a lot of sharing of information. And I've got great confidence in those that keep us safe. David, it's something that we are in a crisis. In Ontario, we have put our foot down. Enough is enough. And I'm going to be very vocal tomorrow at the table and say again loudly, the federal government knows where the cars are going, and it's about time that they put enough resources in place to help solve the problem in a jurisdiction that is theirs.
No, and I get that. And the 28 million, I guess, is designed to start towards that. But as you said, you don't really know what the scale would be. And I don't know if you'll get that full plan tomorrow. But in your letter to Minister LeBlanc, you urge the government to review the criminal code and consider treating vehicle theft for what it is, a serious crime. So are you looking for a change in the incarceration penalties, and bail conditions, these sorts of things for people who steal cars? What specifically do you want to see there?
Well, absolutely. There has to be consequences where we don't have what we have now. And that is if a person steals a car and is arrested and is held on remand and is released and steals a car again, this is the revolving door. We want to stop it. And the government should treat auto theft very seriously. And there should be very, very serious consequences for doing this. And we will be advocating for that tomorrow as well.
But what specifically, I guess, Minister, is it 3-year sentences, 5-year sentences, 18 months? What is the proposal that you think stops this flow of bad actors who are stealing these cars?
Well, I think what stops the flow is a commitment, on all different levels of government, the municipal level of government, the provincial levels and territorial levels of government, and the federal government, to come together. And I can tell you, in speaking to my provincial and territorial colleagues, they are absolutely in agreement that this type of criminality is totally, totally unacceptable. And in Ontario, we have put our money where our mouth is by providing the grants, by providing the tone, by providing the expectation, by working and having the police services, the OPP, municipal and First Nations police services work very collaboratively. It is an all-of-government approach. David, we take this matter very seriously.
Okay, and the federal government has been criticized by some people as not taking it seriously, but they would argue this summit is proof that they are taking it seriously. So just as a final point, Minister, What's the top thing you want to see come out of this gathering tomorrow to send this signal, send this tone, and specific measures to deal with this problem?
Well, David, I've said it. I've said it in the legislature of Ontario. I said it seriously. You know, I invite Minister LeBlanc and other members of his government to meet me at the border, to open up a sea container so we can see for ourselves. But what's important to understand is that the federal government must take responsibility for what is in their jurisdiction. I think tomorrow's summit will be helpful because we have all of many stakeholders there, including the representatives from different provinces. And we will be very clear in our message to Minister LeBlanc. It's not just the $28 million. It's understanding that we have a serious problem at the Port of Montreal, at other ports, at rail yards. Put whatever resources are required. Treat the outbound containers the same as you treat the inbound containers. You've got the technology. Put the protocols in place, and let's stop this crisis and send a message to anyone who thinks it's okay to steal a car. It's not. We will find you and we will lock you up.
Ontario Solicitor General Michael Kerzner, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, David.
The National Summit on Combating Auto Theft is set to take place here in Ottawa tomorrow, and Équité Association will be presenting at the summit, and their VP of Investigative Services, Bryan Gast, joins me now. Bryan, it's good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
We're all suddenly very focused on auto theft here in Ottawa and politically. You've been focused on this for a long time. Tell us why this has become such a big problem, particularly in Quebec and Ontario.
Yeah, and theft in Canada has been a significant issue. Last 5 or 6 years, it's been an upward trend. Really, since the pandemic, it's really turned into a crisis level. Organized crime has really entered into the space more than they were before. With the supply chain issue, vehicles were hard to come by. They've taken that opportunity, and now they are stealing vehicles for some primary reasons. One of them is for export. So they are stealing vehicles. They have a laundry list of vehicles that they would like to acquire. So they're stealing those vehicles, getting them out to the country, and selling them overseas. And one of the concerning pieces is this isn't a financial, this isn't just a property crime. It's not a victimless crime. These crime groups are using the vehicle as a commodity. It's funding organized crime. It's funding terrorism and criminal acts that's staying within the country in people's communities. So it's turned into a significant crisis, especially in the last 2 to 3 years.
So this isn't just random carjackings and random, people breaking into a car and taking off with it. This is a more organized, more sophisticated. I mean, clearly, if they're using container ships to get things out of the country. Why that shift? What is it that has caused organized crime to shift so aggressively in this direction in the last 3, 4, 5 years?
Really, it's the money. It's money motivated. It's high reward, low risk. They have the technology to be able to steal the vehicles. You talked about Quebec and Ontario. Why are those numbers so significantly high? There's a few reasons for that. One is the population base, the high volume of targeted vehicles that organized crime are seeking, and the proximity to the Port of Montreal, Port of Halifax, and Port of St. John. But primarily the Port of Montreal is the big exit point.
So, because we've heard a lot of political conversation about this, right? People blaming lax bail laws, people saying there's not enough enforcement. Do those factor into this, or is it just like a market opportunity that crime rings have seen and decided to take advantage of?
I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I mean, it's going to take a lot of things to fix the problem, but it also caused a lot of things that caused the problem as well. One of them was, but it is financially motivated. $1.2 billion in 2022 of vehicles stolen. So that's a lot of money that the criminals are trying to acquire and profit from. So this is all profit motivated and financially motivated crime.
And so then the money they get from like shipping the cars off, and I've seen my colleague David Common, he went off to Africa and found somebody's car, after it had been stolen and brought overseas. Is this funding drug operations? What is this money being used for broadly?
Yeah, and we work with Interpol. We were fortunate enough to be at the Interpol conference in Lyon, France last year, working with our international partners. Interpol, they gather intelligence, and it's clear that it's funding organized crime, it's funding terrorism, it's funding drugs, weapons, not only domestically but internationally. So this, again, is not just a victimless crime. It's a significant issue for society.
Where does enforcement come into this? At the municipal police force level, at the ports? You know, we saw the federal government, the summit is tomorrow, but $28 million today for the CBSA, a lot of that to deal with the challenges at the Port of Montreal. Where does enforcement fit into this picture?
Yeah, and even in my policing career, auto theft has always been an issue, not like it is currently right now when it comes to the monetary value. But I can say in the last 6 to 8 months to a year, I've never seen the collaboration, cooperation of all law enforcement working together, municipal, regional, and provincial. So it is significant. So there is an enforcement side, working with CBSA and private-public partners with the likes of Équité and our expert examiners and vehicle investigators. So again, it's not going to be enforcement that solves it. We're not going to arrest our way out of this. So it's going to be everybody coming together, and that's what's so exciting about tomorrow's event at the summit. Having everybody talking about the problem and what the solutions are, and then working on concrete plans to move forward and remedy this issue.
The federal government's role in this, the focus today in what they had to say was about the Port of Montreal. I mean, is that really it? Shutting off the market access? If you steal the car, you can't get it out of the country, it makes it less lucrative, more risky, and just it's a disincentivier for crime, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, Ontario, Quebec, they have very low recovery rates, which simply means vehicles are being stolen for export. Those vehicles are often already containerized and on their way to the ports. So by diminishing and slowing the supply, you're ultimately diminishing the demand, and that's what we want. We, Interpol suggests that we're a source nation for stolen vehicles, and we want to combat that. We want to make it harder for criminals to get steal vehicles and get them out of the country.
Okay, so it's all on the agenda, and there is a big agenda tomorrow with a lot of the key players that you outlined that are going to be at this summit. What needs to come out of this? I mean, surely, like the $28 million that Dominic Leblanc announced, I'm sure will help, but that's not the solution in and of itself. What do you need to see come out of this summit?
Really, it's all partners working together. Everybody has a role to play, whether it be the manufacturers helping to make vehicles harder to steal, community awareness of what the problem is, how to protect yourself. The insurance industry commits a tremendous amount of money on the investigative to work with law enforcement and CBSA. We do whatever we can to support CBSA's efforts, so this is a welcome announcement. Trying to, again, it'll be working together, making the vehicles harder to steal, making it harder to get criminal or the vehicles out of the country are some of the primary methods, and just working together, collaboration, working together.
On that, making it harder to steal them. I've got a push-start car with a keyless entry, so I'm a prime candidate to have my signal stolen by one of these relay interceptor machines that they're using to get into cars and then start them. What can manufacturers do on their end? What should they be doing at their end? Because if the way the car operates is the vulnerability, that seems like a pretty good starting point.
Yeah, I mean, we work, so 2007, the current standard in Canada was introduced by Transport Canada, mandated for all manufacturers. Unfortunately, it hasn't been updated since, so we're suggesting that vehicles themselves have to be harder to steal, with some of the considerations as how vehicles are being stolen, through reprogramming thefts, through relay attacks, like you talked about, intercepting the radio frequency between the key fob and the vehicle. So working to identify what the vulnerabilities are, and then working with manufacturers to remedy those solutions. That in itself isn't the silver bullet. Again, it's going to be everything working together, making the cars harder to steal in the first place, working at the ports, which has already been being done. There's been some really good movement in the last 6 to 8 months with increased presence there. So it's just that collaboration, working together. Provinces working together, Ontario and Quebec. We welcome the news last year with the money that was brought on by the Solicitor General's office to have a dedicated auto theft team in Ontario. And what's, I think, really significant about that as well is the dedicated prosecutors that are going to be attached. So like I said, this is not a victimless crime. So using these prosecutors to seek prosecutions and sentences that are reflective of the seriousness of the crimes will be an added deterrent as well.
Right. So work is getting done on this. Work has been done on this, as you say. But and forgive my naivety on this, but if you make them harder to steal and make it harder to get to the market where the money comes from, those seem like the two big things that you could do, right? If you can find some way to make the cars more theft-proof and then tighten up the ports, that would probably put a pretty big dent in all of this, wouldn't it? I
agree. Yeah, I agree. That's, those are two of the big ones, and then just information sharing and working together to combat that. Absolutely.
Bryan Gast, thanks for your time and your expertise. This is Bryan Gast, the Équité Association VP of Investigative Services. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.